Laudare, benedicere, predicare.
Good morning. I'd like to talk to you this morning about the current debate of same-sex legalization unions. It's kind of a big point right now, but this, in essence, has to do with directly the respect for marriage that it seems our society has completely lost track of, or rather has completely disregarded within its progression into the human factor, as they call it. I'd like to first start off with some basic notions that are problematic within our current societies, especially here in the West, in the United States, and in Europe. I would like to go ahead and talk about some of the issues that we have philosophically that have created this disrespect for marriage, and also, of course, this complete disarray of society in such a manner that we've formed ourselves into chaos. The first notion that is clearly problematic from a contemporary philosophical point of view is man's ideas that true freedom, natural freedom, exists without the existence of laws or without the existence of formalized authority. We could say in many ways that the rise of democracy and the falling of the kingdoms represents the falling of the kingdom of God, or rather, not really the falling of the kingdom of God, but the falling of man's acceptance and unity with the kingdom of God, with, of course, the governance of themselves, man's governance of themselves. In many ways, this is creating a large problem because from the time of the American Revolution and the French Revolution, such writers as Rousseau, Locke, Sarkozy, some of these more well-known libertarian idealists within the realm of philosophy have laid out that natural freedom is man's right to rule himself. We know that in essence this can create chaos, and we see this chaos take its true form. The devil really used these notions to be put into an extreme in the 1960s, 1970s with the sexual revolution, which really destroyed the dignity of the human person and destroyed the dignity of the respect for marriage. So we arrived at these basic ideas and concepts that man believes that natural freedom exists without the submission of a higher good or the submission of a higher love. I would like to just go ahead and talk very briefly. This will be a brief introduction to a larger catechetical teaching that I'll post on the website. You can see that right down at the bottom, sacredbanquetministries.org, on the teaching of the dignity of marriage and sort of where and how we need to really attack this issue of same-sex unions within this country. We have to understand first of what is marriage, and we have to understand primarily where the church stands in all of this. We're going to start with Humanae Vitae, page 5, and in Humanae Vitae, Pope Paul VI clearly states that marriage is not then the effect of chance or the product of evolution of unconscious natural forces. It is the wise institution of the Creator to realize in mankind his design of love. by means of the reciprocal or personal gift of self, proper and exclusive to them. Husband and wife tends toward the communication of their beings in view of mutual personal perfection, to collaborate with God in the generation and education of new lives. This becomes important when we start to look at certain notions concerning the adoption of children by homosexual couples, and that'll be touched on in the later video. Right now, I'd just like to give a brief understanding of the teachings of the Church. The primary thing that we must understand is that homosexuals in themselves are not sin. The act that they commit is the sin. They have what the Church calls an intrinsic disorder, the cross that they must bear. But they must not look at it as a burden, but that since Christ carried that burden on the cross, that they, through Him, will overcome and stay right into the reasons of natural law. We also have to understand that when we seek to give legal recognition to same-sex unions, we threaten to throw into chaos the social order that allows and gives wise and prudent judgment towards the idea that marriage is the center of our sociological institution, our sociological organism. By placing same-sex unions on equal footing with married couples, we do a grave injustice against married couples. We also do a grave injustice against those children who are adopted by same-sex unions. Since by allowing such adoptions, we therefore deny the right of that child to not to a husband and wife, but to a mother and a father. Thus, there is a grave injustice being done on two fronts: one to the child in the case of same-sex union adoptions, and another to those heterosexual opposite-sex unions, traditional marriage unions, marriages that do actually provide what the true purpose of marriage is. We cannot say that the procreation and education of children and procreation and union are not one and the same, since marriage in of itself represents the Trinity and is as a personal example of the bride of Christ with Jesus Christ. There is a union of oneness that takes place in that, and we have to understand that. Again, this is just a basic teaching. I will go into a much longer, detailed catechesis later on. The video should be coming up here in the next day or two. But for the effects of understanding the nature of marriage, I think it is important that we understand that God has ordained that marriage be between a man and a woman, which we see in Genesis, and that these same-sex unions are disordered and honestly do not allow natural freedom, but actually create natural enslavement, in which man becomes enslaved to his passions and to his own personal desires, rather than the natural good that has been created by the divine Savior.
Regard your people's present tears.